Ladies and gentlemen, today the world stands at a dangerous crossroads. Imagine waking up to headlines that could reshape global security overnight. Reports have emerged suggesting that Iran may be claiming a breakthrough in nuclear capability, an announcement that has sent shockwaves through Washington, Tel Aviv, and NATO headquarters. Within hours, emergency meetings were called among the United States, Israel, and NATO allies. The question echoing across diplomatic corridors is simple but terrifying. Are we witnessing the beginning of a new nuclear era in the Middle East? The possibility that Iran may be claiming a breakthrough in nuclear capability has sent a wave of concern through the global political and security landscape. For decades, the international community has watched Iran's nuclear ambitions with a mixture of diplomacy, pressure, and strategic caution. But now, a new and alarming question is emerging in political circles and intelligence briefings around the world. Asterisk, has Iran finally crossed the threshold that many feared for years? Asterisk, if such a claim proves credible, it could mark one of the most consequential moments in modern geopolitical history. For years, Iran has insisted that its nuclear program is designed solely for peaceful purposes, including energy production and scientific research. Officials in Tehran have repeatedly stated that nuclear technology is a sovereign right under international law. However, Western governments and many regional powers have remained deeply skeptical, arguing that Iran's enrichment activities and missile development programs suggest a much more strategic objective. The concern has always been that once a country develops the capability to enrich uranium at high levels, the technical barrier to building a nuclear weapon becomes significantly smaller. What makes the current moment particularly tense is the timing and context of this alleged claim. The Middle East is already facing heightened tensions, fragile alliances, and ongoing conflicts that have reshaped the regional balance of power. Against this backdrop, even the suggestion that Iran may possess or be close to possessing a nuclear weapon introduces a new level of uncertainty and fear. Security analysts warn that nuclear capability does not just change a country's military strength, it fundamentally alters diplomatic relationships, deterrence strategies, and the calculations of every neighboring state. Consider the strategic implications for a moment. If Iran were to successfully demonstrate nuclear weapon capability, it would immediately transform the security environment of the Middle East. Countries that have long relied on conventional military superiority or external security guarantees would suddenly face a nuclear-armed rival. This possibility raises a powerful and unsettling question. Asterisk, would other nations in the region begin pursuing nuclear weapons of their own? Asterisk, history suggests that when one country acquires nuclear capability, others often feel compelled to follow, fearing that their security could otherwise be compromised. Another critical element in this unfolding situation is the technological threshold itself. Nuclear weapons development is not simply about possessing uranium or scientific knowledge. It requires the ability to enrich uranium to weapons-grade levels, develop reliable delivery systems, and create a functioning warhead design. Intelligence agencies around the world have spent years analyzing Iran's progress in each of these areas. Reports have frequently suggested that Iran has the technical capacity to move quickly if it chooses to do so. That so-called breakout time, the period needed to produce enough weapons-grade material, has been a central topic in negotiations and security planning. Now imagine the global reaction if that breakout moment were no longer theoretical. Governments would face immediate pressure to respond. Diplomatic channels would intensify. Intelligence monitoring would increase dramatically, and military planners would begin preparing for scenarios that only months earlier seemed distant. The psychological impact alone could be enormous, sending financial markets, defense systems, and political alliances into rapid recalibration. There is also a powerful narrative dimension to Iran's potential claim. If Iranian officials publicly frame such a development as a symbol of technological achievement or national strength, it could resonate deeply with domestic audiences and allies in the region. Nuclear capability is often portrayed not only as a security tool, but also as a marker of scientific and strategic independence. From this perspective, the announcement could be presented as a demonstration that Iran has successfully resisted years of sanctions, pressure, and diplomatic isolation. Yet this narrative collides directly with the fears of other nations. For Israel in particular, the possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran has long been described as an existential threat. Israeli leaders have repeatedly stated that they will not allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons, emphasizing that such a development would dramatically alter the strategic balance in the region. This stance adds another layer of urgency and tension to the situation, as policymakers consider how different actors might respond if Iran's claim were verified. The international community has spent years attempting to prevent precisely this scenario through negotiations, sanctions, and monitoring agreements. Diplomatic efforts aim to limit uranium enrichment levels, restrict nuclear facilities, and establish inspection regimes designed to provide transparency. However, political shifts, regional conflicts, and disagreements over compliance have complicated those efforts, leaving the world once again facing a deeply uncertain nuclear question. At the center of this issue lies a profound global dilemma. Nuclear weapons carry a unique weight in international politics. They are not simply military tools, they represent the ultimate form of deterrence and the most destructive force ever created by human technology. When a new state approaches that capability, the consequences extend far beyond its borders. Military doctrines change, alliances tighten, and diplomatic strategies evolve almost overnight. So the world is left watching closely, analyzing every statement, satellite image, and intelligence report. Is this claim a strategic message meant to strengthen Iran's negotiating position, or does it signal a genuine leap forward in nuclear capability? The answer could reshape not only the future of the Middle East, but also the global order that has tried for decades to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. In the world of global politics, there are moments when the pace of diplomacy suddenly accelerates, when secure phones begin ringing in government offices, when intelligence briefings move from routine updates to urgent alerts. The reports surrounding Iran's alleged nuclear breakthrough have triggered exactly that kind of moment. Within hours of the claim circulating across political and intelligence channels, leaders from the United States, Israel, and the NATO alliance began coordinating what can only be described as a rapid and highly strategic response. The urgency of these consultations reflects a powerful reality. When nuclear capability enters the conversation, hesitation is not an option. At the center of this response stands the United States, led by President Donald Trump, whose administration has repeatedly emphasized that preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons remains a critical national security priority. Washington's immediate reaction has been to consult closely with allies and intelligence partners, ensuring that every piece of available information is carefully examined. The United States possesses one of the most sophisticated intelligence networks in the world, combining satellite surveillance, cyber intelligence, and regional monitoring systems. When a potential nuclear development is reported, analysts move quickly to verify claims, assess capabilities, and determine whether the announcement reflects political signaling or genuine technological advancement. But the urgency is not limited to Washington alone. For Israel, the possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran carries implications that go far beyond traditional geopolitical rivalry. Israeli leadership has long maintained that such a scenario would fundamentally threaten its national security. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly warned that Iran's nuclear ambitions represent a direct and unacceptable danger. In response to the recent reports, Israeli defense officials have reportedly intensified security consultations, reviewing intelligence assessments, and discussing potential strategies with their American counterparts. These discussions are not merely diplomatic formalities, they involve deep coordination between military planners, intelligence agencies, and political leaders who understand the stakes of every decision. At the same time, the broader alliance structure of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, commonly known as NATO, has also been drawn into the crisis. NATO was originally formed as a collective defense alliance, built on the principle that a threat to one member could be considered a threat to all. Although the organization's primary focus historically centered on Europe and the North Atlantic region, modern security challenges increasingly require attention to developments in the Middle East. When the possibility of nuclear escalation emerges, NATO's strategic planners begin evaluating the broader implications for international security, missile defense systems, and regional stability. Inside NATO headquarters, Emergency consultations typically involve a complex network of diplomatic and military discussions. Representatives from member states share intelligence assessments, examine satellite data, and debate potential responses. Some countries may emphasize diplomatic engagement, urging renewed negotiations and international monitoring. Others may prioritize deterrence, calling for stronger defense coordination and enhanced military readiness. This dynamic reflects the diversity of perspectives within the alliance, where each member nation brings its own strategic priorities and political considerations to the table. What makes this situation particularly intense is the speed at which decisions must be made. Nuclear developments can change the strategic environment almost overnight. Governments cannot afford weeks of hesitation when the stakes involve potential nuclear weapons capability. As a result, emergency meetings often occur behind closed doors, where leaders exchange candid assessments and explore every possible scenario. Intelligence officers present classified briefings, military officials outline contingency plans, and diplomats evaluate the potential impact on ongoing negotiations. Another important dimension of these emergency consultations is the role of deterrence. In international politics, deterrence is built on the idea that clear signals of strength and unity can prevent escalation. When major powers respond quickly and collectively to a potential nuclear development, they are not only gathering information, they are also sending a message. That message is intended for multiple audiences: allies who seek reassurance, adversaries who are calculating their next move, and the global community that is watching closely. Behind the scenes, communication channels between governments become extraordinarily active. Diplomatic envoys exchange messages, intelligence agencies coordinate data sharing, and defense ministries analyze the strategic balance across the region. These processes may not be visible to the public, but they represent the backbone of international crisis management. Every satellite image, every intercepted communication, every intelligence report becomes part of a larger puzzle that policymakers must interpret in real time. There is also a powerful psychological dimension to these emergency meetings. Leaders understand that their actions or even their silence can influence global perceptions. Financial markets, military alliances, and regional governments all respond to signals from major powers. A strong and coordinated response can reassure allies and stabilize uncertainty, while hesitation could encourage further escalation or miscalculation. For this reason, the emergency consultations among the United States, Israel, and NATO represent far more than routine diplomacy. They are part of a broader strategic effort to understand the situation, prevent misunderstandings, and ensure that the international community is prepared for whatever developments may come next. In moments like these, global politics moves with remarkable intensity, driven by the recognition that decisions made in secure conference rooms can shape the security landscape for years to come. The potential ramifications of Iran's alleged nuclear claim extend far beyond the immediate geopolitical flashpoints, raising serious concerns about regional and global escalation. When a nation is perceived to be approaching or achieving nuclear capability, the implications are profound and multifaceted, touching everything from military strategy to economic stability, alliances, and the very psychology of international relations. The risk is not hypothetical. It is immediate and tangible, forcing governments, intelligence agencies, and military planners to reassess long-standing assumptions about security in the Middle East and beyond. One of the most pressing concerns is the possibility of an arms race. History has repeatedly shown that when one country acquires nuclear capability, neighboring nations often feel compelled to respond. The principle is clear: no nation wants to be strategically outmatched in a region already fraught with conflict, territorial disputes, and competing interests. If Iran were to possess nuclear weapons, countries such as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt might accelerate their own nuclear ambitions, seeking either to develop indigenous programs or to acquire advanced defense systems to counterbalance the new threat. This cascading effect could destabilize the region in unprecedented ways, creating a security dilemma where each move by one state triggers countermeasures by others, heightening the risk of miscalculation. The potential for direct military confrontation is also a key concern. A nuclear-capable Iran alters the strategic calculus for Israel. the United States, and other allied powers. Military planners must now account not only for conventional threats but also for the specter of nuclear escalation, which adds a dangerous layer of complexity to decision-making. Even routine military actions could carry the risk of unintended consequences if misinterpreted in the context of Iran's newfound capabilities. A regional misstep could trigger a chain reaction, drawing multiple powers into conflict with consequences that extend far beyond the immediate theater of operations. Beyond the Middle East, the global implications of a nuclear-armed Iran are profound. NATO nations, European countries, and Asia-Pacific powers would need to reassess their security postures, particularly in terms of missile defense, intelligence sharing, and contingency planning. The presence of another nuclear actor in a volatile region introduces uncertainty into global trade, energy security, and international diplomacy. Oil markets, for example, are notoriously sensitive to instability in the Gulf region, and even the suggestion of potential conflict can drive price volatility and economic ripple effects worldwide. Financial markets, investors, and governments would all feel the consequences, underscoring the interconnected nature of modern security and economic systems. Diplomacy, while critical, becomes more complicated under these conditions. Countries may face pressure to recalibrate existing agreements, form new coalitions, or impose additional sanctions in response to Iran's nuclear development. International institutions, from the United Nations to regional security councils, would be tested as they attempt to mediate tensions and prevent escalation. The challenge lies not only in negotiating with Iran, but also in managing the reactions of other regional actors, balancing deterrence with engagement, and maintaining credibility with global partners. Every diplomatic decision carries weight, and missteps could accelerate instability rather than contain it. The psychological dimension cannot be overstated. Perception is a powerful driver in international security. A nuclear-capable Iran could embolden its regional ambitions, sending a signal to adversaries and allies alike that it is a power to be reckoned with. This perception could influence regional conflicts, proxy engagements, and negotiations on everything from border disputes to energy agreements. At the same time, neighboring nations may act out of fear or mistrust, increasing military readiness, conducting exercises, and investing heavily in defensive systems. The tension generated by perception alone can create conditions ripe for conflict, even absent immediate provocations. Another critical consideration is the potential erosion of non-proliferation norms. The global non-proliferation regime, built on decades of treaties, inspections, and diplomatic frameworks, relies on the principle that the spread of nuclear weapons is undesirable and dangerous. If Iran achieves nuclear capability, it could embolden other countries to pursue similar programs, challenging the credibility of existing treaties and agreements. This would not only increase the number of nuclear actors, but also weaken the established mechanisms for monitoring, verification, and enforcement, making the global security environment far more unpredictable and dangerous. Military analysts also point to the heightened risk of miscalculation. When multiple actors operate under uncertainty, with high stakes and incomplete information, even small incidents can escalate rapidly. A border skirmish, a missile test, or a misinterpreted movement of forces could trigger a chain reaction of responses, with each side acting defensively or preemptively. The presence of nuclear capability amplifies these risks exponentially, because the consequences of error are catastrophic. In such an environment, the margin for misjudgment shrinks dramatically, requiring constant vigilance, clear communication, and robust mechanisms for crisis management. Intelligence agencies around the world are acutely aware of these dangers. Monitoring Iran's capabilities, missile tests, and nuclear facilities becomes a priority, not only for the United States and Israel, but also for NATO allies, regional powers, and global security organizations. Every piece of information must be analyzed for its implications, interpreted in the broader context of regional politics, and used to inform strategic decisions. The stakes are extraordinarily high, and failure to anticipate the consequences could have ramifications that extend far beyond the immediate region. The potential for escalation is further intensified by Iran's relationships with other influential powers. Alliances, strategic partnerships, and historical grievances all play a role in shaping responses to a nuclear-capable Iran. Countries such as Russia and China, which maintain significant diplomatic and economic ties with Tehran, could influence regional calculations in ways that complicate Western strategic planning. These dynamics make crisis management far more complex, as decisions by one actor reverberate across a web of global interests, potentially creating unintended consequences that are difficult to predict or control. Ultimately, the risk of regional and global escalation underscores the fragile nature of international security in the modern era. Nuclear capability is not simply a matter of military strength. It reshapes alliances, influences perceptions, and introduces a level of uncertainty that can destabilize entire regions. The world is now grappling with the possibility that Iran may join the ranks of nuclear-capable states, forcing policymakers, diplomats, and military planners to prepare for scenarios that were once theoretical but now feel immediate, urgent, and potentially transformative. The global community now faces a complex and unprecedented challenge as it contends with the potential ramifications of Iran's alleged nuclear advancement, and one of the most critical dimensions of this crisis is the impact on international diplomacy and strategic alliances. When a country moves toward or achieves nuclear capability, it is not simply a regional issue. It reverberates across continents, forcing governments to reassess existing treaties, military commitments, and the balance of power in ways that demand both immediate action and long-term planning. The presence of even the possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran compels policymakers to think in multiple layers: how to prevent escalation, how to reassure allies, and how to maintain credibility in the global arena. At the forefront of diplomatic concern is the potential strain on alliances that have historically relied on mutual security guarantees. NATO, for example, was founded on the principle that an attack on one member constitutes an attack on all. Yet the evolving situation in the Middle East tests the limits of that collective defense framework. Leaders must navigate the delicate balance between demonstrating solidarity with affected members, such as Israel and Turkey, while ensuring that responses do not inadvertently escalate tensions or trigger wider conflicts. This requires a degree of coordination and trust that is often tested when time is short and the stakes are extraordinarily high. Simultaneously, bilateral relations between the United States and its Middle Eastern partners are under intense pressure. Washington has long served as both a security guarantor and a diplomatic mediator in the region, but Iran's nuclear ambitions create a scenario where alliances may be tested and long-standing agreements could be called into question. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan, which rely heavily on US support for both defense and strategic deterrence, may feel compelled to accelerate their own military readiness or pursue alternative security arrangements. These shifts could reshape the strategic landscape of the Middle East, compelling nations to reassess the reliability of traditional partners and the cost-benefit calculations of their own defense strategies. Meanwhile, global institutions such as the United Nations and the International Atomic Energy Agency are suddenly thrust into the spotlight. These bodies are charged with monitoring compliance, facilitating diplomatic engagement, and managing the complex web of treaties designed to prevent nuclear proliferation. The credibility of these organizations is on the line, as they must respond quickly to ensure transparency, verify claims, and maintain confidence that existing frameworks are effective. Failure to act decisively could undermine decades of international norms aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and embolden other nations to pursue similar capabilities. Another dimension of this diplomatic challenge is the role of major powers outside the immediate region. Nations such as Russia, China, and the European Union have economic, political, and strategic ties with Iran that can influence the trajectory of this crisis. Their engagement, or lack thereof, can either facilitate de-escalation or exacerbate tensions, depending on the signals they send and the policies they pursue. Coordinating an effective response across these diverse actors requires nuanced diplomacy, strategic foresight, and an understanding of the historical relationships that shape decision-making in each capital. The intricacies of these relationships cannot be overstated, as miscommunication or unilateral action by any one power could set off a chain reaction with far-reaching consequences. The strategic calculus is further complicated by the fact that Iran's nuclear capability, real or perceived, changes the dynamics of deterrence. Traditional methods of conflict prevention, including conventional military deterrence and economic sanctions, may need to be re-evaluated in light of the new reality. Diplomatic channels must be maintained not only to negotiate restrictions or de-escalation, but also to establish lines of communication that reduce the risk of miscalculation. The margin for error in this context is virtually non-existent, because the consequences of misunderstanding or misinterpretation can escalate from political tension to military confrontation in a matter of hours. Public perception and global opinion also play a critical role in shaping diplomatic responses. Leaders are acutely aware that decisions regarding nuclear-capable states are closely watched by the international community, financial markets, and domestic populations. A coordinated diplomatic response signals stability and control, while disjointed or delayed action can be interpreted as weakness or indecision, potentially emboldening actors seeking to test boundaries. In this environment, every statement, every visit by a diplomat, and every communiqué carries weight, influencing not just governments but the broader strategic environment in which they operate. In addition, the potential impact on regional conflict dynamics cannot be ignored. Iran's nuclear claim intersects with ongoing tensions in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and other flashpoints where the country has strategic influence. Diplomatic efforts must account for these broader conflicts, as any shift in Iran's perceived strength could alter the behavior of proxy groups, local governments, and other regional players. The ripple effect of these calculations means that negotiations over nuclear issues are inseparable from discussions about broader security, energy, and humanitarian concerns. Intelligence sharing and collaborative security measures become essential tools in this complex diplomatic equation. Allies must pool resources, share real-time information, and coordinate contingency planning to ensure that any response is proportionate, informed, and strategically sound. These collaborative efforts are not simply tactical, they are the backbone of maintaining trust, deterring aggression, and demonstrating unity in the face of a potentially destabilizing development. The challenges are immense, and the pressure on diplomats, intelligence officials, and military planners is unprecedented. Finally, the human element in diplomacy is critical. Leaders must weigh not only strategic calculations, but also the broader implications for populations, economies, and the potential for humanitarian crises. Decisions made in response to Iran's nuclear claim carry consequences that extend beyond borders, influencing refugee flows, energy markets, and global perceptions of security. The interplay between strategy, ethics, and pragmatism is delicate, requiring skill, foresight, and the ability to anticipate second- and third-order effects. Every negotiation, every meeting, and every diplomatic communication becomes a test of leadership, judgment, and the capacity to navigate a world where the stakes could not be higher. The unfolding scenario demands continuous vigilance, rapid decision-making, and an unwavering focus on both immediate and long-term consequences. Global diplomacy is now operating in a high-stakes environment where traditional strategies intersect with emerging threats, and where the balance of power could shift with a single announcement or miscalculation. Every actor in this complex web must weigh their options carefully, communicate clearly, and act decisively to manage the risks associated with a nuclear-capable Iran, knowing that the world is watching and that the consequences of failure are almost unimaginable.